She made me smile so many times my cheeks hurt. Never wanted any film on that camera. Well, I threw her out the window. And I went down to visit her mom. Mom never missed her. No, I'm just kidding. She felt terrible, and it just one of them deals. But, well, then the folks started coming. And all I can tell you is you want a humbling experience. This is probably one of the most humbling experiences I've ever went to. And these are real people down there. And boy, they made me look at them. First of all, I was trying to not look at them, and be a little goofy. You know how you try to be when you don't want to be crying and stuff like that. So I was trying to goof around. Man, they wouldn't let me. They'd stop and hold my arm and say, Pete, I want to thank you. Save my brother's life, or save my brother-in-law, and for what you did. And I was really trying to hold it together. And I kept hanging around my wife like my ma, We're pretty tough, aren't we? But I said, she'll bail me out of this. She kept pushing me, get up there. I'll put all these medals on her after the day was over. But they all started coming in there, and they all wanted to know what happened, because they never do what happened. So I started telling, we're sitting around there, and about the time one group, another group come in. I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm getting kind of embarrassed telling this story. I feel like G.I. Joe here. And she goes, look, you just sit right down in that chair, and whoever wants to hear that story, you just keep telling it. That's what you're here for. So I told a story 4,000 times more. And about that time, I thought we were looking pretty good. I was holding up pretty good. They had all this food. The only one that didn't eat was me and Donald. We were so nervous. I didn't want to throw up on everybody. My stomach was churning. Then this little old lady comes in with white hair. It kind of looked a little bit like my mom and mine. Man, she was sobbing. She come up with my wife and got a hold of her. Boy, she wouldn't let loose. I said, I'm out of here. I left and went over to the other room and talked about something goofy, and so forth. And it kind of went like that. It was just a real humbling experience, and they're just great folks. I can't explain to you the feeling and the bond and the family. And that's what I wanted to meet. I wanted to meet his family. His daughter was there. She's 26 years old. She was there, and his son was there. Everybody was there. It was just like a homecoming. I felt like part of the family, except they call them hillbillies. They're Southerners, but they straightened me out. And I should have known there's no hills around here. It was all flat. But anyway, Mrs. Edwards, a hillbilly, wherever she's at. But anyway, the next day, Donald, I said, we're going to stay another day, Donald. So he was all excited, and we sat down. He says, Pete, I got to tell you what's happened in the last 26 years, if I can. Because, when I threw Donald out of a helicopter in Vietnam, first I didn't think he was going to live. Even when I threw him on there, I thought he was maybe getting delirious the way he was talking, because I didn't realize the power of the Lord back then to begin with. But I really didn't think he was going to live, but I thought, if he does live, at least he's going to get the best of care and have the best doctors and the best government behind him. Because he was pretty patriotic, and I believed in America. And I found it was entirely different. I found out some things, and these are some personal things, but I don't think they'll mind me telling you. But, Donald was treated basically like a lot of vets. He was treated like a piece of discarded luggage. They had done things to that man that was worse than that wound ever would have been. And when I left there, I found out that the easiest thing happened to him was getting shot. They would hold him down, and they would have to run these wires into his bladder because scar tissue has closed up on his urethra. I mean, all the time. Incompetency, they'd leave him go there, and they would pull these things out, and it would grow together, and then they'd have to hold him down and run steel rods up to cut this tissue through. And I don't want to get into this, but this is what he's been going through. He was in the hospital for a year and a half, almost 3 years in and out, and it's still not over. But that's what you have there, just total incompetency. They mainlined him on Denver, but he didn't want it. Shot his nerves, because it's easy to just put him in there and shut him up, and we'll get you when we can. And it was just a nightmare, I found out. And really, it broke my heart, really. We left there. His brother lived in Ocala, Florida, and he called there several times. He goes, Down, you tell Pete, I don't care what time he comes by this exit, I want him to call me, and I'm going to meet him at the exit. He's a pastor down there, his brother is. So I said, well, he's going to meet us in the parking lot. But we left Alma, Georgia, heading down to Florida. And I just lost it, you know. And it wasn't just Donald. I got to thinking about the men that fought in that war. How they were blamed for it. If we'd have went to Canada, Carter let us back in. Nobody would have bothered us. Since we went there, it was our fault. Then I got to think about the injustice of all that. And I told my wife, you know, they sent his wife a Purple Heart. They never put it on his discharge papers. There's a whole other story there. The house burned down. They lost the Purple Heart, and they can't get another one because the government never put it on his papers. As far as they're concerned, he was never wounded. He never saw his uniform. This one I have on right now, and these patches right here are our outfit. He never even saw these. He was discharged from the hospital and just sent him home, however he got home. He never even knew what his awards were. And I told my wife then, I says, I'm buying that man a uniform. The government won't do it, I'm doing it. Well, I hit Florida and I started. We went to the Army Navy shops and see you have to buy what you can because it's been 26 years and a lot of stuff they don't have anymore. We got him a national uniform. It's from every state in the Union. But I started down there putting it together. And we stopped and met his brother, and I said, we're going to his brother's house. If we came all the way down here and we can't spend 20 minutes and a couple hours or whatever, 20 miles to visit him, we're not coming down here. So I called him, we went to his house. And you know, I told that story 100 times, didn't bother me. And when I went to tell Johnny, his brother, that story, I couldn't get it out. And I couldn't explain to him, but I wanted to, that it really didn't have anything to do with Donald being shot. It had to do with the whole injustice. And that I never knew about till then, because I just stayed busy. Well, we came back. We came back to Toledo. And I started putting everything together for him. And then I got to thinking about Desert Storm. Man, I was fired up for Desert Storm. I was in front of that television. I was proud that we had a leader like President Bush that said, you're the military. Here's what I want done. You do it. I wasn't used to that. If they'd have called me, I'd have been gone. My wife had to wash the car herself. Because I knew they had an objective, and I knew they were going to let it go. And it happened that way. And they came back, and I was in front of that television. They had that parade for them guys. And then I got real melancholy. You know? I thought, man. $58,000 killed. Thousands wounded. Then I thought, you know, I thought about the Vietnam veteran. And the only one I can really tell you about is one standing right here, but I think there's a lot of similarities. Hey, man, we were America's best. Just throw money, will you? You know, I thought about my childhood. I had it made. I grew up in the 50s, in the 60s, and America was a great country. I mean, patriotism abounded. Christianity abounded. Right and wrong. Character. It was all over the place for me. You know, when I went to grade school, I got to thinking about it. And the worst thing ever happened to me in grade school, my whole 8 years, was we went on a picnic towards the end of the year, and I put a couple night crawls in each one of my ears. And I was in the coat room, and I was going to scare the girls. And Mrs. Vittmeyer was standing out there, my teacher, and she fainted. I didn't know anybody was afraid of worms. I knew I was in trouble because she got up and wobbled out of that door. So I put them worms back in the can. I sat down at that chair, and everybody was standing around ready to go on this picnic. Nobody said nothing. I was the only one sitting there like this. Everybody knew it was coming. We had this principal, and there's some people in here who have been to this school, so they know her. Her name was Mrs. Rohrbacher. That was her name. She come firing in that door. Miss Vittmeyer was throwing up somewhere. Miss Rohrbacher grabbed me by the back of the ear, and she took me down them stairs. I mean, she flew down them stairs. I thought my ear was about that long when I got there. And she goes, Peterson, you got a choice. I'm either taking you home to tell your dad, or you're going to get 5 whacks. I said, I'll take the whacks. I've been over this desk, and she had one of these here girl paddles with no holes in it, and the boy paddle with these big old holes in it. But she got that boy paddle down. I said, can't be worse than my dad's going to do to me. I got in about 3 of them whacks, and I said, can I call my dad? She says, too late, you made your decision. But see, that's the kind of discipline I had, you know, and that's the whole country was that way. You know, when I think about it, I was trained to be a soldier. My whole life, when I went home, I played guns. I was out there, and I was the hero, and I played cowboys and Indians, and the good guy always won. And when I think about it, I was saving people all the time. I mean, all the time. That's what I did. We didn't have a lot of television then. It just came out. I look at TV back then. They had family shows. They had, Ozzie and Harriet or some of those. John Wayne, World War II. I mean, we were so proud of our veterans back then. I mean, the VFW American Legion, it was a big deal. I mean, the churches were involved in all of it. It was a big deal. Even television, some of those shows. Remember the Musketeers? Annette Funicello. Pearly white teeth. A little sparkle in her eye. You know, I probably shouldn't say this because my wife's in the room, but we were madly in love. Matter of fact, we were going to get married someday. She just didn't know it. If Annette Funicello come down the alleyway right now and proposed to me, now I know what the Bible says about divorce, and I agree 100%. But I might give bigamy a shot. Nah, I'm just kidding. Just lost 4 ladies out the back door. I might have lost the #1 Musketeer, but I gained Cinderella. Yes. But, you know, what I'm trying to say is they were just wholesome days all the way around. You couldn't get, and if you did something wrong, everybody's after you, including the neighbor. It didn't make a difference. You just did right. But I remember when I went to Vietnam, and I got to Chicago, and I had a slick sleeve uniform with nothing on it, and I saw this guy getting off the plane, and he had all this paraphernalia on there, and I thought, that's what I'm doing. I'm going over there to do a job, and I'm going to do it for my country. Then I came back. In 1969, I got back in Vietnam. And the first place I went was this little restaurant, because I never saw this uniform either. And you give them your papers, and there's a whole bunch of ladies in there sewing, and they give a steak dinner. When you're done, you go get it, and it's ready. They measure you up. It's just a production line, and everything's on it. And I had to stay in a motel then, and I decided I was flying to San Antonio, Texas. One of my good friends there had lost his leg in an ambush. And he was just out of the hospital. We had been writing, and he'd been home about 3 weeks. So I said, I'm going to San Antonio to visit him before I go home. Well, I flew down there, and they were all excited to see me, and all his friends came over, and we were going to go out, and it's the first time I heard this. They said, you better not wear a uniform. And I says, well, okay. You know, so we went down to the store, because that's all I had, and bought some civilian clothes. We wore it the whole week down there. Had a great time. Then I put it back on the fly home because I had to have it on the fly there. And then I had some old hippie girl come by and said something to me walking by in the airport, and I didn't think I heard her right. I couldn't exactly tell what she said, but it wasn't anything. She didn't want a date, I can tell you that. And I didn't want one either. But anyway, and it got me thinking a little bit, you know, and because I hadn't had a television or nothing. I just walked off that plane, and from 1967, when I was in the Army, until 1969, when I came back, I hadn't seen any television, really didn't know what was going on that much. And then I came home to my folks' house. I had 30 days to do before I had to go back to Georgia. I ended up in Georgia, by the way, in a post for 6 months. And I thought, well, so I went and saw some of my friends. And where you been? I said, well, I've been in Vietnam. They acted like I was just gone for the weekend. Didn't ask me anything about it. And it was like, nobody cared. I mean, nobody cared. What happens is you think about the guys over there, and it gets confusing. So what I did, I'll never forget this. I had my uniform hanging in the closet, and I slid all my clothes over. I hung that uniform back in the corner, and I buried it. And all I could think about was the thing I wanted the most in my life, and the thing I cherished the most, I couldn't have. Ever. So I got mad at it. I got mad at my friends. I got mad at myself. I got mad at everybody. I mean, not running around stomping mad, I was just totally confused as a young man. And I couldn't be proud of what I wanted to be proud of. I wasn't a vet like other vets. And that's one of the reasons that it was important to me to get down that uniform. Can I have the chapel singers come forward, please? I'm going to do something right now. I have a presentation to make. And what I want to do at this point in time is I want to dedicate this really to the men that fought in Vietnam and the men that fought in other wars, like Somalia and a few of the other ones that are going to be forgotten because of the mismanagement. But that uniform I told you about, I got it all right. I finally had to go up to Detroit, Michigan, and I got that uniform. And that uniform is right back here in that hallway, and Donald Johnson's wearing it. Not yet. Not yet. 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock today. I wouldn't let him see that uniform. I sent it down to him to get it fitted, but he never saw it put together. So he hadn't seen that till about 2 o'clock today. We went upstairs, and the Blade took some pictures. They're going to do a thing in the paper Monday. So we had to put it on early, but he's on there. But what I'd like to do now, after 26 years, I'd like to welcome home from Vietnam, Donald Johnson. We didn't tell him nothing because he never came.
Well, I had one sentence memorized, but I lost it. First, I'd like to thank everyone for having me here. I know we're here to give glory to God. I certainly want to be that the first thing that I do. But I also want to give recognition to a man. We have lots of examples in the Bible of men performing courageous acts. The man is recognized, but God is given the glory, as he is this day. When David killed the giant, God had lots of men in his army, but they were afraid of the giant. Only David was brave enough to face the giant. The day that I was wounded, there were other men that could have risked their life to save mine, but only one did. It's that brave man that I would like to give honor to this day. As I do, I would like to present to him a token of appreciation that he may look at from day to day and remember this moment. I'm supposed to have a package that the Pony Express wants to bring by, but I don't think the horse made it. Tim Peterson.
Thank you, brother. My wife don't buy me presents. I don't know how to open these things. You're not supposed to do this. It's supposed to be the other way around. Take it. Well, got the three men here from the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. And on the bottom of it says, "Greater love hath no man than this that he laid down his life for his friends." If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., that Vietnam Memorial, they have those three soldiers that are on there right in front of the wall. So maybe we can just sit those down here on the second step. If you want to look at them afterwards or something, they can take a look at them. Because now You were supposed to do that now. See, we don't like to do this really, handing stuff back and forth, but I'm really not doing it. I'm doing it more for friendship. I just feel down deserves some things too. And I found out there are some people that care. They just didn't know. Now the veterans knew, or at least the Vietnam veterans know. A lot of the veterans do, but a lot of people just didn't know. And I tell you, you don't explain things. It's hard to explain. You can't. So what happens to the Vietnam veterans? He doesn't say anything. It's light and that's it, just like everybody else does from other types of things. But that's what we have. But I have a couple things here, Donald, I want to present to you. Also to take back with you to remember this occasion. And you have that one plaque there where are the plaques at? Are those around here? Where are they at? Okay, can I have that white one first? First of all, what this says is presented to Liberty Baptist Church. I made a mistake on that one. This is from the Disabled American Veterans in Toledo, Ohio. And the men over there put this together, and I really appreciate what they did. The veterans have been great. And by the way, the Vietnam veterans in Toledo are processing Donald's Purple Heart right now. And while they're at it, they're going to do mine too, because I never got mine. So I stubbed my toe one time going to chow. Unfortunately, we had to go through the government, so it'll probably be here about 6 years. We'll look you up then. But the men here from these organizations, you got to understand, this happened so quick, this whole thing, that when I came back, I mean, we're talking like 3.5 weeks notice, and that's it. And I called some of these fellows up, and this is a Disabled American Veterans, what it says, Certificate of Appreciation, may it be known by all who read this, that this Certificate of Appreciation has been presented to Donald Ray Johnson for exemplary service in Vietnam, presented this 23rd day of April, 1994. And then it's signed by the men and the president. So that's what that is. I'm going to leave these set down here, and then afterwards, if you want to come up and take a look at them, you can. By the way, all these organizations want to bring color guards and everything else. And I said, well, you can't. And he goes, why? I said, it's a ladies program. I said, well, what do you mean a ladies program? I said, well, you wouldn't understand. That's what it is. Well, I said, how are you going? I said, hey, if it's your store, you can go. So, and I didn't want all them guys around here anyway. But anyway, so we're going to take some photos afterwards holding these things here so I can send back to these guys, and also a videotape of the thing. And could I have that other plaque? This one right here is from the American Legion, Conweisenberg Post down here on Lexus Road. And they were more than gracious. They really put the rush on this. This comes from the National, and they sent it in. And what it says, Donald Ray Johnson, December 12th, 1968, the day he was wounded. C Company, 431st, 196th Infantry. A token of our appreciation for your sacrifice in Vietnam. April 23rd, 1994, Con Weisenberger, Post 587, American Legion. Okay, just 1 minute. That's all you're getting from them. I came back from Detroit. You can sit down. When I came back from Detroit, I came by the Vietnam Memorial in Monroe, Michigan. And it was dedicated, I believe, in 1984, 1987. I can't remember the exact date, but I remember my wife and I, after church went up there, it was dedicated, I think, around 2 in the afternoon. And they had a granite offer. Maybe it never happened. It was so long ago, so I thought, I'm just going to stop by. Names of the Vietnam veterans from Monroe County that had served in Vietnam that were alive, and my name was on that wall. They had put it on there because I lived in Monroe County. And behind that wall, they have a granite wall with the names of the dead and the POWs on there, and they did a real nice job with it. But I hadn't been there for so long, I thought, maybe my name blew off, or maybe it never happened. It was so long ago, so I thought, I'm just going to stop by here because I drove right by it. And they did an excellent job. As a matter of fact, they added a helicopter memorial next to it, and it's on a pole, the same kind of helicopter that picked Donald up in Vietnam and took him back. It's a Huey. So I looked around there, and there was a sidewalk around it. It had a circle around it. So I was leaving, and they had some literature, and I just grabbed it and threw it in my truck. Well, about a week later, because I was getting things ready for Donald's uniform and everything, I started to read that literature, and I found out that you could buy a brick to go on that sidewalk, a monument. Well, now we're down to about 3 weeks, so I got a hold of that guy. I said, look, can I get one of these bricks made up? I told him the story, and get in that and have it put in that sidewalk when Donald Johnson comes up here. And he goes, man, I don't think so. He says, you're talking 10, 15 weeks. He said, but you send that stuff up there and we'll fax it. Well, they did, and it came in 3 weeks. I've got that stone. And he said, there's 4 ahead of you, but yours came in first. Pays to go to church. But I got to think about Donald and his life and some of the things he's been through and his family and some things. And I just wanted to do something for him that was, like he said, just wanted to do something for him. So what this stone says, it's very simple. It says December 12th, 1968. One soldier to another. Tim Peterson and Donald Johnson. And I've got that stone right here. Would you bring that up here, please? Man, she's got to be strong. That thing's heavy. Why don't you take that there? Then I asked him if I just went up and got this last week. It came in that quick, And I said, I want to have it here. So I went up and got it. And I asked him if we could put it in that sidewalk while it was here. And he goes, yes, sure, we'll do it. So Monday at 7 o'clock, we're going to go up to the Vietnam Memorial, and we're going to dig a hole in that sidewalk and put that thing in there. Now, when we're dead and gone, they start spraying graffiti on it, won't make any difference. Right now, it's pretty important, so we're going to put her in there for us. And I'm done with this session, and before I leave here, I'm not going to do it right now in just a second. We're going to stand. I want to tell you one more thing, by the way. Donald, on the way up there, they bought another helicopter that they're going to be putting in this memorial this summer, and it's what's called a Cobra gunship. And they came out about the time Donald and I were there. It was a 2-man ship strictly for offensive rocket firing and so forth. And I found out they got that gunship sitting up here in Ida on a farm. And the guy said, you bring him up there at 6 o'clock, we'll let you sit in it and take some pictures back to Georgia. So we're going to stop there and go to that gunship. We'll put our wives in there because they're running the show anyway now. So we're going to do that on the way up there. But before we stand and say Pledge Allegiance, the flag's at the back of the room here. I just want to say one real quick thing to Donald. I've talked to him, and again, him and his wife, I can't. She's a soldier, boy. When I come back from Georgia, I got a letter from Donald. You see, I understand how Donald felt. I don't know if he really knew if or not, because all I could see was Tim Peterson. And I'm not so sure Tim Peterson could have handled it so well. And I got a letter from Donald and went something like this. I hope he doesn't mind I share this, but doesn't make any difference if he lines or not. Don't forget it. And what his letter said was, you know, Pete, when I see you down here and I see your energy, I see myself. I'd never been wounded. But I was a victim of circumstances, and I just can't do what I want to do. And then he said, Pete, I don't want you to take up my cause. I want you to live your life like you've always lived it and just be my friend. I knew what he was saying. But he made me mad anyway. So I called him up and I told him this. I said, Donald, I don't take up causes. Number one, it's biblical not to take up causes. And I said, every time I took one up, it got burned anyway. I said, tell you what I do take up. I take up friendships. Not just yours, anybody's in this room. And if somebody deserves something along the way, and there's something I can do to help them get it, as a friend, I'm going to do it. And I think he understood where I was coming from. Because I knew this about Donald. When he was laying on that jungle floor, he didn't live because he's a Christian. Because going home wasn't bothering him. He told me why he lived. To see his wife and his baby again. That was the only reason. And I told him, you know, Donald, 50% of Donald Johnson is worth more to me than 100% of a lot of men. And as that same wife and that same baby that you lived for back then, now you got a son, you got grandkids. They mean as much to you mean as much to them now as it did back then. So you got a lot to live for. I want you to keep these folks in your prayers. Donald's got to go back and have another operation. It's very traumatic, as you can imagine. So I ask you to do that for me, if you would. And I want to thank him for coming up. With that, would you stand, please, while we pledge allegiance to the flag? Ready, Donald? Go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We're done. Music.
That he has waited for. At a ceremony up in Temperance, Michigan, Donald Johnson received a replica of the uniform he should have been given when he left Vietnam. He never got that honor because he was wounded in an enemy ambush and spent months hospitalized. Staff Sergeant Tim Peterson is the man who saved Johnson's life. He went to a half dozen states to put together the uniform that his fellow soldier never had.
A certain recognition that certain pride about the uniform that I've always had, that I've never had a chance to have, I guess, in all those years.
Today I feel like I've really received what you might say a reward, a real recognition of what I gave of myself in Vietnam.
Today's ceremony was part of an annual women's meeting at the Lewis Avenue Baptist Church. In addition to all the honors that Johnson received today, a memorial stone with both soldiers' names will be dedicated in Monroe tomorrow.
Some veterans have for years said they were treated unfairly, many claiming they didn't receive the same welcome home that other veterans did. But tonight, one soldier is getting the recognition he deserves, not from the U.S. government, but from a Toledo man who saved his life. NWO's Vivian Fidel has the story.
2 more names are being added to this Vietnam memorial in Monroe, Michigan. Names of Tim Peterson and Donald Johnson. But this memorial doesn't just commemorate those who died in the war. It's also a reminder of those who fought in it and survived. Like Peterson and Johnson, who were caught in an ambush in December of 1968, but are alive today to tell their story.
I thought I was just there all along right by myself and at the mercy of those big cars. And I realized I couldn't crawl out, and I just thought that was amazing.
Well, when I realized I couldn't crawl out of there, I low crawled down there on my stomach, and I couldn't really see him. And then when I broke these bushes and so forth, I ran into him face to face, and I was whispering to him because I didn't want them to hear us. And at that time, I said, "You're going to have to help me get you out of here." But I realized he was severely wounded, so he couldn't.
Before that December ambush, Johnson and Peterson didn't know each other. But the former machine gunner from Georgia wanted to know more about the Ohio man who rescued him. For years, he tried locating Peterson and finally did in February. According to Johnson, the reunion seemed to relieve some of his war-related stress.
I wanted to see Pete, look him in the eyes, and tell him thanks for saving my life.
As a part of their reunion, Peterson had this granite stone carved with both their names and that unforgettable date.
But I just felt I wanted to do something for Donald that was going to be lasting. And when I found out that you could purchase a stone to inlay in Vietnam Memorial in Monroe, Michigan, I knew right away that's what I wanted to do.
While the two men say the inscribed stone that will be placed in this memorial brings back painful memories of the war, they hope it's a building block to happier memories in the future. Vivian Vidal, NW News Watch, Monroe, Michigan.
A fitting memorial.
Antenna Valley near Da Nang. Sergeant Tim Peterson of Monroe comes to the rescue of a dying Donald Johnson.
I walked into an ambush.
It was one of those situations where you had no control of what was going on right then.
The person on my right ran out, and I thought I was by myself. I didn't know that Tim Peterson was on my left.
I realized he couldn't move, and I still didn't think he was going to live at that point in time.
I knew I was bleeding to death.
And his exact words to me, when I looked at him, color came back to him. He said that the Lord was going to let him live, and he's going to see his wife and daughter again.
Tim risked his life. Risked his life to save my life.
He was laying there in the jungle, and he said this. He says, "Pete, you got to promise me something." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "I want you to promise me you're going to pray to God and read the Bible more and not swear so much."
He pulled me out and drug me out before they could put me on the helicopter.
When he got back to the hospital in Vietnam, they said he was about 1 to 2 minutes away from dying. He'd taken 27 pints of blood right then. And it was just miraculous he even lived.
And it's miraculous they've been reunited 26 years later. Donald settled in Georgia. He only knew Tim as Pete. Both wondered what happened to the other. But a friend tracked down Tim Peterson here in Toledo.
It was like a lost brother. And especially after about 10 minutes when that ice broke loose and everything, it was just like we'd been brothers for years.
And guess what? Tim has stopped swearing and says he's found God.
Well, I learned one thing about life as I look back at that thing. There's no guarantees. And you better know who your maker is, because when the time comes, you don't have any choice over it.
And in remembrance of that dark night, a stone is now in place at the Monroe County Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It reads, "One soldier to another, Tim Peterson, Donald Johnson."
When I look at that stone, it's really overwhelming.
Same kind of stuff.
You see, he saved my life, and he's acting like I saved his life. He's a great man.
Donald Johnson and Tim Peterson will soon be sharing yet another common bond. Both will be receiving Purple Hearts. Donald had one, but lost it in a house fire. Tim has never been honored for his heroism during the war in Vietnam. In Monroe, I'm Dick Berry, Toledo 11, the News Channel.
What an incredible story.
You have to wait 20 years to hear those good ones sometimes.
Oh, boy, I'll tell you.
Amazing.
Stop swearing. I told him to stop swearing and say his prayers.
Okay, I promise.
The Johnson family scrapbook. These pictures help tell a story that should have ended 26 years ago. Donald Johnson, drafted on his 22nd birthday. He leaves a new wife and child behind and lands in Vietnam on his 23rd. 2 months later, he's ambushed. The memories hang heavy and the wounds run deep.
It just burned all the way up.
A sniper's bullet ruptures his bladder and lodges at the base of his lung. His sergeant risks his life and pulls him out. Johnson spends a quarter of a century looking for that sergeant. He finally finds him. A fellow Alma vet named Gene Brown uncovers a clue in a war letter. Don Johnson travels to Toledo, Ohio to reunite with Sergeant Tim Peterson. He says it's like
having a long-lost brother that you've met, and just so glad that you've met him, you know, and you're with him now.
He was immediately taken from that depressed state into a state of mind to where, wow, this is one of the most important things that has happened in my life.
Their meeting earned Purple Hearts for both men and brought more war mementos into the Johnson household. Meanwhile, 26 oak trees line the Johnson home. Donald's planted one for every year he's lived after his near death in Vietnam, except for one. The man who saved his life planted this one.
When he planted that tree in my yard, it was like a bond.
A bond he thinks will help glue his life back together. Craig Patrick, WSAV News 3, Alma.
That was some reunion.
Yes, the tree of life, literally there.
Still
Thank you. You may be seated.